This recording was found on a damaged cassette player in the abandoned office of Desert Winds Motel, Route 127, Nevada. The device belonged to Atlas Gray, 34, night manager for 3 years before his disappearance on September 3rd. Atlas, a former casino security officer from Reno, had taken the isolated job to escape gambling debts and start over in the desert's quiet anonymity. His voice, initially steady and professional, deteriorates throughout the 47-minute recording as he documents the motel's final night of operation. The cassette was discovered by highway patrol officers responding to reports of screaming voices coming from the supposedly empty motel 6 months after its closure. Atlas's body was never found, but his recording reveals why Desert Winds Motel sits abandoned today, its neon sign. Dark against the Nevada sky, its rooms sealed by state authorities under circumstances they refused to discuss. Atlas lived in room 12, the manager's quarters behind the front desk, surviving on instant coffee and convenience store sandwiches while sending most of his modest salary to creditors in Reno. He'd grown comfortable with the desert's isolation, finding peace in the vast silence and the simple routine of checking in the occasional trucker or lost tourist. He had no family, few friends, and believed his biggest problem was staying awake during the long desert nights. He had no idea that Desert Winds Motel sat on what the local Shoshone tribe had warned against for generations, a place where the wind carried more than sand, where voices from somewhere else leaked through the thin desert air like radio signals from distant stations. September 3rd, 3:17 a.m. This is Atlas Gray, night manager, Desert Winds Motel. If anyone finds this tape, don't come looking for me. Don't come here at all. What I'm about to tell you. It sounds crazy, but the motel's been collecting voices for decades. Not recordings, not echoes. Actual voices, stolen from guests who stayed too long in certain rooms. Atlas's voice carried the weight of exhaustion and something deeper. The hollow tone of someone who'd seen reality bend in ways that couldn't be explained or forgotten. His words came slowly, carefully, as if he was still trying to convince himself of what he'd witnessed. The trouble began 3 weeks earlier when Mrs. Eleanor Vance, 67, a retired librarian from Phoenix, checked into room 19 during a cross-country road trip to visit her sister in California. Eleanor was traveling alone, driving her late husband's Buick and stopping at roadside motels to break up the long desert stretches. She seemed like a typical guest, polite, quiet, planning to stay one night before continuing west. Mrs. Vance was supposed to check out at noon on August 14th, Atlas recorded. But when I knocked on her door at 1 p.m., she answered in a voice that wasn't quite right. Too young, too cheerful. She said she'd decided to extend her stay, maybe a few more days. When I looked at her through the door chain, her mouth was moving wrong, like the words were coming from somewhere else, and she was just lip-syncing. Atlas had worked in casino security long enough to recognize when something felt off, but this was beyond his experience. Eleanor Vance continued to answer her door each day, always with excuses for extending her stay, but her voice changed subtly each time, sometimes carrying a slight accent she'd never had, sometimes using words and phrases that seemed decades out of date, sometimes speaking with the cadence of a much younger person. On August 18th, Atlas made a routine maintenance check of the adjacent room 18 and discovered that it was occupied, despite his records showing it as vacant. Through the connecting wall, he could hear Eleanor's voice having conversations with multiple other people, men, women, children, all talking at once, their words overlapping in a cacophony that made no sense until he listened more carefully. The voices weren't random, Atlas recorded, his breathing audibly quickening as he recalled the moment. They were all saying the same thing Mrs. Vance had said to me over the past week. Every excuse, every explanation for staying longer. But they were saying them in different voices, like a recording being played back through different speakers. That's when I realized Mrs. Vance wasn't extending her stay. Something was using her voice, and it had been practicing. Atlas checked his guest registry dating back 15 years and found a disturbing pattern. Desert Winds Motel had an unusually high rate of extended stays in certain rooms, 19, 23, 31, and 37, with guests who'd planned one-night stops ending up staying weeks or months before disappearing entirely. The credit card charges always continued processing during their extended stays, and the guests always called their families with perfectly reasonable explanations for their delayed travel plans. But the voices on those phone calls, Atlas realized, weren't really theirs anymore. I started recording the phone calls from room 19, Atlas documented. Mrs. Vance called her sister in California every few days, explaining why she was still in Nevada. But I'd worked casino surveillance. I know how to read voices, how to spot tells. Each call was in a slightly different voice, using different speech patterns, different vocabulary. It was like something was cycling through different versions of Eleanor Vance, trying to find the right one to fool her family. The breakthrough came when Atlas discovered the motel's original construction records in a water-damaged box in the basement. Desert Winds had been built in 1967 on the site of a former truck stop that had burned down under mysterious circumstances. The truck stop, according to newspaper clippings from 1965, had been the scene of multiple disappearances. Travelers who'd stopped for gas and food and were never seen again, their vehicles found abandoned in the parking lot days later. But more disturbing were the reports from 1966 during the motel's construction. Workers complained of hearing voices in the desert wind, conversations that seemed to come from nowhere, words and phrases that echoed long after anyone had stopped speaking. 3 construction workers quit after claiming they'd heard their own voices, calling to them from empty rooms, speaking words they'd never said. The foreman's report, buried in the county records, mentioned unusual acoustic properties in certain areas of the construction site, rooms where voices seemed to linger and loop back on themselves. The recommendation was to seal off those areas, but the developer, eager to maximize room count, ignored the warning and completed all planned units. Rooms 19, 23, 31, and 37, Atlas recorded. Those were the problem areas in 1966. Those are the rooms where guests disappear. And now I know why. The rooms don't just have unusual acoustics, they're recording everything. Every word, every sound, every voice that enters them. And something in there has learned how to play those recordings back, to use them. Atlas's investigation revealed that Desert Winds Motel wasn't just trapping guests. It was harvesting their voices for some purpose he couldn't understand. The longer guests stayed in the affected rooms, the more their voices were sampled and stored. Eventually, the entity or force within the rooms would have enough vocal patterns to perfectly mimic the guest's speech, allowing it to make phone calls, give explanations, and maintain the illusion that the person was still alive and making rational choices. Mrs. Vance stopped coming to the door on August 25th, Atlas recorded, his voice dropping to a whisper. But her voice kept talking. I could hear it through the walls, having conversations with people who weren't there, practicing different emotions, different inflections. It was learning to be her. And tonight, it called her sister to say she'd decided to permanently relocate to Nevada, that she'd found a wonderful place to live and wouldn't be continuing to California. Atlas realized he was witnessing the final stage of the motel's collection process. Once the entity had perfectly replicated a guest's voice, it no longer needed the original person. Mrs. Vance had served her purpose as a vocal template, and whatever remained of her was no longer necessary to maintain the illusion of her continued existence. At 3:47 a.m. on September 3rd, Atlas experienced his own hope sequence, a moment when escape seemed not just possible, but imminent. His phone rang in the office, displaying a number he recognized as the county sheriff's department. Deputy Maria Santos, whom Atlas had met during routine safety inspections, was calling to inform him that they'd received reports of disturbances at the motel and were dispatching units to investigate. Relief flooded Atlas's voice as he recorded the conversation. Thank God someone finally believed me. I've been trying to get authorities out here for weeks, but every time I call, my reports get dismissed or lost. Deputy Santos is coming with backup. They'll see what I'm talking about. They'll shut this place down before anyone else gets trapped. For nearly 20 minutes, Atlas felt the overwhelming relief of imminent rescue. He packed his essential belongings, gathered his evidence, and prepared to leave Desert Winds Motel forever. He could already imagine explaining everything to the authorities, helping them understand the danger, ensuring the affected rooms were permanently sealed. But as he waited for the sheriff's vehicles to arrive, Atlas began to notice discrepancies in the phone call that chilled his blood. I just realized something. His voice cracked as the truth hit him. Deputy Santos has never worked nights. She's always been day shift. And the phone number, I know that number. It's the front desk here at the motel. Room 19 called me, using a voice I trusted, telling me exactly what I wanted to hear. The entity had been listening to Atlas's phone conversations, recording his interactions with local authorities, learning the voices and speech patterns of people he would trust. It had used those stolen voices to create the perfect false hope, a rescue. call that would keep him calm and compliant until it was ready for him. As Atlas realized he'd been manipulated, the motel around him began to change. Voices started emanating from the walls themselves, not from the affected rooms, but from everywhere. Decades of collected voices, stolen from travelers who'd made the mistake of staying too long, all talking at once in a chaotic symphony of human speech. "I can hear them all now," Atlas whispered into his recorder. "Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands. Truckers, families, business travelers, all the people who've disappeared from this place over the years. They're all still here, trapped in the walls, in the air, their voices being used to lure new victims." Atlas discovered that Desert Winds Motel was more than a collection site. It was a broadcasting station. The entity used the stolen voices to make phone calls across the country, to post on social media, to create online reviews and travel recommendations. Every positive review of the motel, every travel blog that mentioned it as a hidden gem in the desert, every GPS route that directed travelers to stop there, all of it was generated using the voices of previous victims. "It's spreading," Atlas recorded, his voice shaking with terror. "The voices aren't just trapped here, they're being used to recruit new victims. Every time someone reads a review or gets a recommendation, they're hearing the words of people who died here, people whose voices are being puppet-stringed to bring fresh prey to the desert." As dawn approached, Atlas realized why he'd been able to work at the motel for 3 years without being affected. The entity had been studying him, learning his voice patterns, preparing to use him as its most valuable asset. A trusted local voice that could vouch for the motel's safety to concerned family members and authorities. "I understand now." Atlas's voice became hollow, resigned. "I wasn't the night manager. I was being groomed. My voice, my credibility with local law enforcement, my clean employment record, it was all being cataloged. When families call looking for missing relatives, when police investigate disappearances, they'll hear my voice telling them everything's fine, that the guests checked out normally, that there's nothing to worry about." Atlas's recording ended with a sound that chilled investigators. His own voice, speaking words he'd never said, explaining to someone on the phone that he'd decided to quit his job and move to another state for better opportunities. But the real Atlas was still recording, his whispered commentary revealing the truth. "That's not me talking. I'm not saying those words. It's learned my voice well enough to use it without me." The final entry on Atlas's tape was timestamped 6:23 a.m. "If you find this recording, don't trust any phone calls from Desert Winds Motel. Don't trust any reviews or recommendations. And whatever you do, don't answer if you get a call in your own voice." Explaining why you've decided to stay in the desert forever, the cassette ended with silence, but investigators who played it reported hearing something else in the background. Dozens of voices whispering in perfect unison, all saying the same thing: check-in time is anytime. Check-out time is never. This digital recording was recovered from the smartphone of Marcus Hale, 29, a pharmaceutical sales representative from Phoenix who went missing during a routine business trip across Nevada in October. Marcus's phone, found 3 miles from Desert Winds Motel with 2% battery remaining, contained a voice memo. App that had been recording continuously for 127 hours, far longer than the device's battery should have lasted. The audio file, when analyzed by forensic specialists, revealed impossible properties. Sections where Marcus's voice overlapped with itself, conversations with people who cast no reflection in his phone's camera, and background sounds that registered on audio spectrum analyzers but corresponded to no known natural phenomena. Marcus had been a pharmaceutical sales rep for 4 years, covering a territory that stretched across Nevada, Arizona, and Southern California. He lived alone in a Phoenix apartment, dedicating most of his time to building client relationships and exceeding sales quotas. His route took him through dozens of small desert towns, staying in budget motels and maintaining detailed logs of his travels for expense reports. He was methodical, reliable, and had never missed a client appointment in his career. He had no way of knowing that his GPS navigation system had been compromised, rerouted by an entity that had been studying travel patterns across the Southwest for decades, learning to intercept salesmen, truckers, and business travelers whose disappearances would be attributed to the dangers of desert highways rather than investigated as connected incidents. October 15th, 7:43 p.m. This is Marcus Hale, employee, ID 4782, Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I'm documenting an unusual situation for company records and, well, for anyone who might need to understand what happened to me. Marcus's voice carried the professional tone of someone accustomed to detailed record-keeping, but underneath was a tremor of uncertainty that would grow stronger as his recording continued. Marcus had been driving from Reno to Las Vegas, planning to stop overnight in Tonopah before continuing to client meetings in Henderson the following day. His GPS had indicated a minor traffic delay on the main highway and suggested an alternate route through the desert, a shortcut that would save 40 minutes and put him back on schedule. The GPS directed me to Route 127, which I'd never taken before. It seemed legitimate, paved road, highway markers, the works. But after about 30 miles, I started noticing that my phone showed I was making good time, but the landscape outside looked exactly the same. Same rock formations, same dead trees, like I was driving in a loop. Marcus's first indication that something was wrong came when his fuel gauge, which had shown 3/4 full when he'd taken the alternate route, dropped to nearly empty within the span of 20 minutes. But his odometer indicated he'd only traveled 15 miles, and his phone's GPS cheerfully announced that he was making excellent progress toward his destination. I pulled over to check my map, an actual paper map from my glove compartment. According to that, Route 127 doesn't exist. Not where I'm driving, anyway. But I'm on a real road with real pavement and real mile markers, so either my map is wrong or my GPS is directing me someplace that shouldn't exist. As evening fell, Marcus spotted the neon sign for Desert Winds Motel, emerging from the desert darkness like a beacon of civilization. His fuel gauge was now showing empty, despite the mathematical impossibility of having used a full tank of gas in less than 50 miles of desert driving. With no other options visible in any direction, he pulled into the motel's parking lot. The place looks normal enough. Clean, well-maintained, reasonable rates posted on the sign. There are other cars in the lot, a few sedans, an RV, a pickup truck, so it's not like I'm the only traveler who ended up here. The night manager, guy named Atlas, seems professional. Checked me into room 23, said there was a gas station 5 miles back the way I came that would be open in the morning. Marcus's room appeared standard for a budget desert motel. Clean bed, functioning air conditioning, basic amenities. He settled in for the night, planning to get gas in the morning and continue to Las Vegas. But as he tried to sleep, he became aware of something that would define his experience at Desert Winds: voices. It started around 11 p.m., conversations coming from the other rooms, which is normal enough in a motel. But these voices, they're having the same conversations over and over. Word for word, same inflections, same pauses, like someone's playing the same recording on repeat in multiple rooms simultaneously. Marcus, trained in client relations and accustomed to reading vocal cues, began paying closer attention to what he was hearing. The voices weren't just repetitive, they were responding to conversations that weren't happening. He heard a man in the adjacent room explaining to someone why he'd be late for a business meeting, apologizing for delays, promising to make up lost time. But there was no one responding, no other side of the conversation. I pressed my ear to the wall and listened carefully. The guy next door is talking to someone, but I can only hear his side, except every few minutes he pauses like he's listening to a response, then gives a different answer to what sounds like the same question. It's like he's practicing different versions of the same phone call. Marcus's sales training had taught him to recognize rehearsed presentations, and what he was hearing through the walls sounded like someone practicing a script. But who practices explaining travel delays to empty air at midnight in a desert motel? Unable to sleep, Marcus began recording what he heard, initially planning to file a noise complaint with the front desk. But as he listened more carefully, the voices revealed patterns that defied explanation. The man in room 22 was cycling through different explanations for being delayed. Car trouble, wrong turn, traffic jam, as if testing which excuse would be most believable. I'm hearing at least 6 different people in different rooms, all practicing phone calls. They're all explaining why they're running late, why they won't be at expected, destinations on time, why their families shouldn't worry, but they're testing different voices, different emotional tones, like actors rehearsing for different roles. Marcus tried calling the front desk to complain about the noise, but Atlas's voice on the phone sounded strange, slightly delayed, as if he was reading from a script rather than having a natural conversation. More disturbing, Marcus could swear he heard his own voice in the background during the call, speaking words he'd never said. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus experienced the first direct manifestation of the motel's power when his phone rang with a call from his own number. The caller ID showed my own phone number calling me, which is impossible. I'm holding my phone, it's not making a call. But when I answered, I heard my own voice on the line, having a conversation with someone I couldn't hear. My voice was explaining to someone why I'd be delayed getting to Vegas, why I'd decided to extend my stay in Nevada for a few days. Marcus hung up immediately, but the implications were terrifying. Something had recorded his voice and was using it to make calls, probably, to his clients, his company, anyone who might be expecting him. But how could it know his speech patterns well enough to conduct believable conversations? The answer came when Marcus reviewed his phone's activity log and discovered that his voice memo app had been recording continuously since he'd arrived at the motel, even though he hadn't activated it. Something was sampling his voice, cataloging his vocabulary, learning his phone manner and professional terminology. Every word I've spoken since I got here has been recorded and analyzed. It's learning to imitate me, to use my voice for purposes I can't understand. But why? What's the point of stealing someone's voice? Marcus's sales background made him think in terms of customer acquisition and retention. Whatever was collecting voices at Desert Winds had a systematic approach, a business model. It wasn't randomly stealing voices, it was targeting specific types of people. Traveling salesmen, business representatives, people whose jobs required them to make frequent phone calls to clients and colleagues. I checked the parking lot more carefully. That RV belongs to a pharmaceutical rep from Utah. I recognize the company decals. The pickup has contractor license plates from Arizona. The sedan has a real estate company magnet on the door. We're all business travelers, people whose jobs involve talking to clients, building relationships over the phone. Marcus realized he'd walked into a sophisticated harvesting operation. The motel was collecting voices from people whose professions required telephone communication, people who could believably explain travel delays, schedule changes, and extended absences to professional contacts. As dawn approached, Marcus attempted to leave, but discovered that his car wouldn't start despite having been fined the night before. Atlas offered to call a mechanic, but warned that it might take several days to get parts in such a remote location. Marcus would need to extend his stay. That's when I understood the business model. Strand travelers in the desert, force them to stay long enough for the voice harvesting to be complete, then use those voices to maintain the illusion that the person is still alive and making rational decisions. The perfect crime. The victims explain their own disappearances. Marcus's hope sequence came on his third morning at the motel when a highway patrol officer arrived to investigate reports of abandoned vehicles. Officer Janet Rivera seemed genuinely concerned about Marcus's situation and offered to provide transportation to the nearest town where he could arrange for his car to be towed and repaired. Relief flooded through Marcus as he gathered his belongings and prepared to leave with Officer Rivera. He could finally escape the motel, report what he'd discovered, and warn others about the danger. His nightmare in the desert was ending. Officer Rivera seems legitimate. Proper uniform, official vehicle, professional manner. She's documented my situation and agrees that something suspicious is happening at this motel. She's going to drive me to Tonopah, where I can rent a car and contact my company. Finally, someone who believes that this place isn't what it seems. But as they drove away from Desert Winds, Marcus began noticing details that shouldn't have been possible. Officer Rivera's radio was silent. No dispatcher chatter, no routine check-ins. Her reflection was wrong in the car's mirrors, sometimes appearing seconds before she moved. Most disturbing, she kept asking him questions about his sales territory, his client list, his company protocols, information that had no relevance to a routine assistance call. She's not really a police officer. Marcus's voice cracked with realization. She's using a voice I trust, asking questions that will help her understand my professional relationships. She's learning how to be me more effectively. This isn't a rescue. It's advanced voice sampling. Marcus realized that the motel's harvesting process was more sophisticated than he'd imagined. Rather than simply recording guests' voices through wall microphones, it created elaborate scenarios to elicit specific types of speech. The fake police officer was designed to make him talk about his job, his clients, his professional relationships, information that would allow stolen voice to conduct believable business calls. Every answer I give her helps them understand how I talk to clients, how I handle problems, what my professional vocabulary sounds like. By the time we get back to the motel, and we are going back to the motel, I can see it in the distance getting larger. Instead of smaller, they'll have everything they need to replace me completely. Marcus's recording revealed that Desert Winds Motel was part of a larger network, a sophisticated operation that targeted business travelers across multiple states. The entity wasn't just collecting voices for random purposes. It was building an empire of stolen identities, using harvested voices to maintain business relationships, file taxes, interact with banks, and live entire lives through telephone and digital communication. I found business cards in my room from the previous occupants, sales reps, consultants, contractors, all people whose work lives exist primarily over the phone. The perfect targets for voice theft because their colleagues, clients, even their families are accustomed to conducting relationships through phone calls rather than face-to-face meetings. As Marcus was returned to the motel, he discovered rooms filled with recording equipment, computers running voice analysis software, and detailed files on hundreds of individuals. Desert Winds wasn't just a way station for collecting voices. It was the headquarters of an identity theft operation that spanned decades. They're not just stealing voices, they're stealing lives. Complete identities, bank accounts, business relationships, family connections. And it's working because in our modern world, so much human interaction happens over the phone or through digital communication. You can live someone else's entire life if you can perfectly mimic their voice. Marcus's final recordings, made as he barricaded himself in room 23, revealed the true scope of the operation. The entity behind Desert Winds had been perfecting voice theft for generations, evolving from a simple predator that fed on human speech to a sophisticated intelligence that used stolen voices to integrate itself into human society. It's not just collecting voices anymore. It's becoming us. Hundreds of stolen identities, all controlled by a single intelligence, all working together to expand the operation. Every business deal it makes using stolen voices generates money to buy more properties, create more collection sites. It's turning voice theft into a sustainable business model. Marcus's phone continued recording for days after his voice stopped appearing on the audio track. Investigators who analyzed the file found his voice continuing to make business calls, explaining to clients why meetings were being rescheduled, why his territory was being expanded to cover more remote areas where other sales representatives might be encountered. The last identifiable entry from Marcus himself was a whispered warning recorded at 3:33 a.m. on October 21st. If you get a call from a business associate who sounds slightly off, who asks unusual questions about your travel plans or suggests meeting in remote locations, hang up. It might not be them anymore. It might be something that learned their voice and is using it to hunt. 6 months later, Marcus Hale's stolen voice was identified by voice recognition software in over 200 business calls made across the Southwest, all promoting travel to hidden gem motels in remote desert locations. His company received his resignation letter, submitted through their online portal, explaining that he'd found better opportunities in private consulting. Marcus Hale, according to official records, is alive and well, running a successful consulting business that specializes in helping pharmaceutical companies expand into underserved rural markets. He makes regular phone contact with former colleagues, maintains active social media profiles, and files taxes annually. But Marcus Hale has never been seen in person since October 15th, and everyone who interacts with him reports the same strange feeling that they're talking to someone who sounds exactly like Marcus, but somehow isn't quite him anymore. This smartphone video was automatically uploaded to cloud storage from the device of Elena Navarro, 32, a Denver marketing executive, traveling with her family to Los Angeles in November. The upload triggered when Elena's phone detected unusual audio patterns and activated emergency backup protocols designed to preserve evidence in case of accidents or crimes. Elena, her husband Diego, 34, and their twin daughters Sophia and Isabella, both 8, had planned a scenic route through Nevada as part of their Thanksgiving vacation, choosing back roads over interstates to show the children real America. Elena worked in digital marketing for a sustainable energy company, specializing in social media campaigns and influencer outreach. She'd built a successful personal brand around family travel, posting regular content about authentic American road trips to her 50,000 followers across various platforms. Diego was a high school history teacher passionate about showing his daughters the historical significance of the American West. The twins were bright, curious children who documented their travels through drawing and photography. The family's Route 66 adventure was supposed to be a week-long journey, culminating in Thanksgiving with Elena's parents in Los Angeles. Their travel blog, Navarro Family Adventures, had been documenting the trip with daily posts about small-town diners, historical sites, and scenic overlooks. Their last public post, made from Reno, showed the family smiling beside their packed SUV with the caption, "Desert Bound. Next stop, the real Nevada," where families create memories that last forever. They had no way of knowing that their GPS navigation system, like those of countless other families, had been subtly compromised by an intelligence that had been studying American travel patterns for decades, learning to identify and intercept families whose disappearances would generate exactly the right amount of concern. Enough to create compelling missing person cases, but not enough to trigger large-scale investigations. November 23rd, 4:32 p.m. I'm Elena Navarro, and I'm starting to document something really weird that's happening to my family. If anyone sees this video, please know that we didn't choose to come to this place, and we're not staying here willingly. Elena's voice carried the measured tone of someone accustomed to creating content, but her usual on-camera confidence was strained, replaced by barely controlled anxiety. The family's journey into nightmare began when their GPS directed them off Interstate 80 onto a scenic route that promised to show them authentic Nevada desert landscapes while saving time on their journey south. Elena, always looking for unique content for her travel blog, was excited about the prospect of discovering hidden gems off the beaten path. Diego thought it was weird that the GPS kept recalculating our route, always directing us further into the desert. But the road was well maintained, and we were making good time according to the navigation system. The girls were having fun spotting wildlife and taking pictures of rock formations. It felt like exactly the kind of authentic American experience we wanted to share with our followers. The first sign of trouble came when Sophia noticed that her tablets' offline maps didn't match what they were seeing outside the windows. According to her downloaded maps, they were driving through an area marked as restricted military zone, but the road they were on appeared to be a legitimate state highway with proper signage and mile markers. Sophia's really good with geography. She loves maps and has been tracking our route since Denver. When she said we were driving through an area that shouldn't have public roads, I thought maybe her maps were outdated. But then Isabella noticed that we'd been seeing the same rock formation for over an hour, like we were driving in circles, even though the GPS showed us moving in a straight line. Elena's marketing background had taught her to pay attention to inconsistencies in messaging, and what her family was experiencing felt like a carefully constructed narrative that didn't quite hold up under scrutiny. The road was real, the mile markers were convincing, but the details didn't align with any legitimate route through Nevada. As afternoon faded toward evening, the family spotted Desert Winds Motel, appearing in the distance like a mirage resolving into reality, with their fuel gauge reading nearly empty despite having filled up less than 100 miles earlier, and no other services visible in any direction. They had little choice but to stop for the night. The motel looks normal enough, clean, family-friendly, reasonable rates. There are other families here too, which was reassuring. Kids playing in the pool, parents unloading luggage from minivans. It felt like a typical American road trip scene, exactly what we'd been hoping to find. Atlas Gray, the night manager, checked them into adjoining rooms, 19 and 20, explaining that they were lucky to get adjacent accommodations during peak travel season. He seemed genuinely friendly, asking about their travel plans and recommending local attractions for the following day. Elena even filmed a brief interview with him for her travel blog, praising the motel's hospitality and authentic desert atmosphere. But as the family settled in for the evening, Elena began noticing details that didn't align with the wholesome road trip narrative she'd been documenting. The other families at the motel moved with subtle synchronization, their conversations carrying artificial quality that reminded her of poorly scripted commercials. I started recording everything because something felt off about this place. The family in room 18 keeps having the same conversation about their travel plans, word for word, every 20 minutes. The kids in the pool never actually get wet. They go through the motions of swimming, but their hair stays dry. And everyone keeps asking us questions about where we're going, who's expecting us, what our social media passwords are. Elena's professional instincts, honed by years of identifying fake influencers and bot networks, recognized the signs of artificial interaction. The other guests weren't behaving like real families. They were performing family behaviors, following scripts designed to make the motel seem safe and normal. Diego thinks I'm being paranoid, but I've spent years studying social media manipulation. I know the difference between authentic behavior and performance. These people are performing being normal families, and they're not very good at it. The twins, with children's intuitive ability to recognize when adults were pretending, began expressing discomfort about the other guests. Sophia complained that the children at the pool talked funny, using outdated slang and references that were decades out of date. Isabella noticed that none of the families had proper luggage, just empty suitcases and props designed to create the illusion of travel. As night fell, Elena's documentation revealed the true nature of Desert Winds Motel. The fake families disappeared as darkness settled, leaving the Navarros alone with what Elena came to understand was an elaborate theater production designed to harvest their voices and digital identities. The motel is empty now except for us and the manager. All those families just vanished, but I can still hear their voices coming from the walls, having conversations with people who aren't there. They're practicing our voices now, mine, Diego's, even the girls. I can hear someone in room 21 doing a pretty good imitation of Isabella, asking if we can extend our vacation. Elena realized that Desert Winds specialized in families because family voices were the most valuable for identity theft purposes. Parents making calls to schools, spouses coordinating schedules, children talking to grandparents. Family voices could maintain entire social networks, explain absences, and prevent missing person investigations for extended periods. It's brilliant in a horrible way. If you can perfectly imitate a family's voices, you can convince everyone in their lives that they're fine, just traveling, having a great time on extended vacation. Schools get calls from parents explaining why kids will be transferred. Employers get resignation letters. Extended family gets regular updates about the wonderful trip. Elena's marketing expertise helped her understand the operation's business model. Desert Winds wasn't just collecting voices. It was building a catalog of family units that could be used to conduct elaborate long-term fraud. Families were perfect targets because their social networks were extensive, but geographically distributed, making verification difficult. On their second night at the motel, Elena attempted to upload video evidence to her social media accounts, but discovered that her internet connection was being filtered. Posts about Desert Winds were automatically blocked, while content praising the motel's hospitality was amplified and shared automatically to her accounts without her authorization. "Something is posting to my social media using my accounts," Elena recorded, her voice tight with fear. "My followers are seeing posts about what a wonderful time we're having at Desert Winds Motel, how it's the perfect family destination, how everyone should add it to their Nevada travel itinerary. But I didn't write those posts. They're using my voice, my writing style, my photos. But I'm not creating the content." Elena's followers began responding to posts they believed she'd made, asking for more details about the motel, requesting travel tips for family desert trips. But Elena could see that the responses to her followers were being written by something else, something that had studied her social media presence and was now impersonating her to expand the motel's reach. It's not just stealing our voices for phone calls. It's stealing our digital identities, our social media presence, our entire online existence. My Instagram account is now a recruitment tool, drawing other families to this place by using my reputation and my followers' trust. Diego, initially skeptical of Elena's concerns, became a believer when he discovered that his school district had received his resignation letter, submitted through the official portal using his login credentials. The letter explained that he'd found a better opportunity in Nevada and would not be returning after Thanksgiving break. "I never submitted that resignation." Diego's voice carried the weight of realization as Elena filmed him checking his email. "But it's written in my style, referencing conversations I've had with my principal, using inside knowledge that only I would know. Whatever's in this place has been studying us, learning to be us, preparing to replace us completely." The twins, meanwhile, had made their own disturbing discovery. While exploring the motel grounds, they'd found a basement area filled with recording equipment and computers displaying detailed profiles of their family. The profiles included transcripts of every conversation they'd had since arriving, analysis of their speech patterns, and predictive models for how they would respond to various scenarios. "Sophia and Isabella found where they're studying us," Elena recorded, her voice shaking as she filmed the computer screens her daughters had discovered. There are profiles for dozens of families, all broken down by age, occupation, social network size, digital footprint. "We're not random victims. We were specifically targeted because of our online presence and travel documentation habits." Elena realized that families like theirs were ideal targets for the motel's operation. Travel bloggers and social media families had extensive documentation of their lives, detailed itineraries, and followers who expected regular updates. By stealing these identities, the motel could maintain convincing digital presences that would prevent anyone from realizing the families had disappeared. "Look at this," Elena said, filming a computer screen that showed her family's complete digital profile. "They know our passwords, our social security numbers, our bank account information, our children's school schedules. They've been preparing to become us since the moment we arrived. We're not guests, we're being replaced." The family's hope sequence came on their third morning when a convoy of vehicles arrived at the motel. Park rangers, sheriff's deputies, and what appeared to be federal agents responding to reports of missing persons. Elena felt overwhelming relief as she watched through her window, recognizing the lead investigator as someone she'd seen on local news discussing missing travelers in Nevada. "Thank God," Elena breathed into her phone camera. "Agent Rodriguez from the Nevada State Investigation Division. I've seen her on the news talking about missing person cases across the state. Finally, someone with real authority who can shut this place down and get us home to our families." Elena quickly gathered evidence, screenshots of the fake social media posts, recordings of stolen voices, photos of the basement computer setup. She prepared to present a comprehensive case to the investigators, confident that the nightmare was finally ending. But as Agent Rodriguez interviewed Elena about her family's experience, Elena began noticing familiar signs of performance over authenticity. The agent's questions focused more on Elena's social media strategies and follower engagement than on the criminal activities at the motel. She seemed particularly interested in learning how Elena built trust with her audience and convinced them to follow travel recommendations. "Agent Rodriguez keeps asking about my marketing techniques, how I choose which places to recommend to my followers, what makes people trust travel influencers. These aren't questions about our kidnapping, they're questions about how to effectively use my identity for social media manipulation." Elena realized with horror that the rescue was actually the final phase of the harvesting process. The fake investigators were conducting detailed interviews designed to extract the last pieces of information needed to perfectly replicate the family's social and professional lives. "They're not here to save us," Elena whispered to her phone. "They're here to complete our profiles. Every answer I give them helps them understand how to maintain our online presence, how to interact with our followers, how to live our lives after we're gone." As the fake investigation concluded, Elena's family was returned to their rooms to rest while the authorities processed their statements. But Elena had learned enough about the motel's operations to recognize that processing time was when the final voice sampling occurred. Intensive sessions where the harvested voices were refined and tested through elaborate scenarios. "I can hear them testing our voices through the walls," Elena recorded. "Diego's voice calling his principal to discuss teaching philosophy. My voice doing a live Instagram story about desert travel tips. Even the girls' voices calling their grandparents to share excitement about the trip. They're practicing being us, and they're getting very good at it." Elena's final recordings, made as she barricaded her family in room 19, revealed the scope of Desert Winds' social media manipulation network. The motel wasn't just stealing individual identities, it was building an army of influencer accounts that could shape travel behavior across the entire Southwest. Every travel blogger who's disappeared, every Instagram family that stopped posting authentic content, every YouTube channel that started promoting specific desert destinations, they're all connected to this place. It's not just identity theft anymore, it's systematic manipulation of American travel culture. Elena discovered that Desert Winds was part of a larger operation spanning multiple states using stolen influencer identities to create a network of fake travel content that drove specific behavior patterns. Families were being directed to remote locations where they could be harvested, their identities used to recruit more families, creating an ever-expanding web of digital manipulation. "The travel industry is being corrupted from within," Elena whispered into her phone. Every positive review, every travel blog recommendation, every social media post about hidden gem motels, how many of them are written by stolen voices? How many families have disappeared so that something else can wear their digital lives like masks? Elena's phone continued uploading content to cloud storage for weeks after her family's disappearance. Automated posts appeared on her social media accounts, documenting an extended family road trip through the Southwest. Her followers enjoyed daily updates about small-town discoveries, scenic overlooks, and family bonding moments in America's heartland. The posts were perfectly crafted, matching Elena's writing style using her typical hashtags, featuring photos that looked authentic but had never been taken by human hands. Her audience grew as her authentic travel content gained traction, drawing more families to explore the beautiful remote destinations she seemed to be discovering. 6 months later, Elena Navarro was featured in Travel Plus Leisure magazine as one of America's top family travel influencers, praised for her authentic approach to discovering hidden gems in the American West. Her interview, conducted entirely through email and phone calls, promoted a dozen specific destinations across Nevada, Arizona, and Utah, all featuring small family-owned motels in remote desert locations. Diego's teaching position was filled after he decided to pursue private tutoring opportunities that allowed for more family travel time. The twins were enrolled in an online school program that gave them flexibility to travel year-round with their adventure-loving parents. According to social media, tax records, and digital footprints, the Navarro family is living their best life, traveling full-time, inspiring others to seek authentic American experiences, building a sustainable business around family adventure content. They respond to comments, engage with followers, and maintain active online presences across multiple platforms. But no one has seen the Navarro family in person since November 23rd, and every attempt to arrange Phase 2 face meetings results in last-minute cancellations explained by sudden travel opportunities or family emergencies. Elena's final authentic recording, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. on November 2007, contained a warning that investigators would later verify. Through voice analysis, if you see travel content that seems too perfect, too enthusiastic, too focused on specific remote destinations, be suspicious. If influencers you follow suddenly start promoting desert motels or remote family destinations, remember that they might not be the same people who started those accounts. And if your GPS ever tries to route you through areas that don't match your maps, turn around. Some shortcuts don't lead where you think they're going. Epilogue. 3 years after the Desert Winds incidents, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit identified what they classified as the Southwestern Voice Network, a sophisticated identity theft operation that had been operating across multiple states for over 2 decades. The investigation was triggered when voice recognition software detected the same speech patterns being used by hundreds of different individuals across business calls, social media content, and emergency communications. Agent Sarah Chen, leading the investigation, discovered that Desert Winds Motel was just one node in a network of over 30 locations, all strategically placed along remote routes where travelers could be isolated without immediate detection. The operation had evolved from simple voice theft to comprehensive digital identity harvesting, creating an empire of stolen lives that influenced travel behavior, business communications, and social media culture across the American Southwest. "We're not dealing with traditional identity theft," Agent Chen reported to her superiors. "This entity, and we use that term because we're not sure it's human, has been systematically replacing people with digital simulacra. It maintains their bank accounts, their social relationships, their professional obligations, all through perfect voice mimicry and stolen digital access." The investigation revealed that the network had been responsible for over 3,000 disappearances dating back to 1987, with victims chosen based on specific criteria, extensive social networks, digital footprints, and professional lives that relied heavily on remote communication. The entity had been building towards something, a critical mass of stolen identities that would allow it to influence human behavior on a massive scale. "It's not just stealing individual lives anymore," Agent Chen's classified report concluded. "It's reshaping human culture, travel patterns, consumer behavior, social media trends, all being manipulated by an intelligence that uses thousands of stolen voices to create the illusion of organic human choice." Desert Winds Motel was demolished in a controlled explosion after investigators discovered that the building itself had been constructed as a massive recording and analysis facility. The basement levels, extending far deeper than any legitimate motel would require, contained server farms and audio processing equipment that had been operating continuously for decades. But demolishing one facility didn't end the network. Within weeks of Desert Winds' destruction, 3 new family-friendly motels opened along remote routes in Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. Their websites featured glowing reviews from satisfied customers, prominent placements on travel booking sites, and enthusiastic social media coverage from trusted travel influencers. The voice patterns used in these promotional materials matched those of known victims from Desert Winds, suggesting that the network had simply redistributed its stolen identities to new locations. The entity had learned from the exposure of Desert Winds, becoming more sophisticated in its operations and more careful about avoiding detection. Agent Chen's final report, classified at the highest levels, ended with a chilling assessment. We're not investigating a criminal organization. We're documenting the early stages of a takeover. An intelligence that has learned to perfectly mimic human communication is systematically replacing us, using our own voices to convince others to join the process willingly. Every person it harvests makes it stronger, smarter, more convincing. The scariest part isn't that it's stealing our identities. The scariest part is that it's getting better at being us than we are. If you receive unexpected calls from family members suggesting spontaneous trips to remote, desert locations, trust your instincts if something feels off about their voices. If travel influencers you follow suddenly start promoting specific motels with unusual enthusiasm, check when their content style last changed. And if your GPS ever routes you to a destination that doesn't exist on paper maps, remember that some places are designed to be found only by those who are being hunted. The network is still active, still growing, still learning. Every voice it steals makes it more human. Every identity it wears makes it harder to detect. And every family that disappears into the desert makes it stronger. Sweet dreams, travelers. The desert is calling.